Yeah. I mean, I sometimes refer to this term that was coined by the U.S. Army War College in around 2001 called VUCA. And it stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And that's kind of the environment that we're living in. And I think we're starting to see it more and more. Certainly, it was very evident to them in 2001. But for even people in business, people in nonprofit organizations, and certainly think about education and just the incredible shift that's taking place now in how people get educated, where, when. It's all changing, and a large part of that is due to technology. So we were hoping that you guys would help us in kind of elucidating what are some of the shifts and changes that are taking place right now that we can feel in our world. VUCA as kind of this external thing, volatility and uncertainty and complexity as this external thing that we're dealing with and managing. And then finding ways to kind of redefine that so that we can access our resourcefulness internally. And so if anything, for me, the shift and the potential from this kind of ground to a new path has to do with the shift from looking out here for the answers and trying to manage things externally, which, in our technologically oriented and individualistically oriented society, we've done a really good job of, to the point where we have all the technology we need to completely destroy ourselves. And we haven't yet really cultivated the kind of interior conditions and the interior ethical stance, which comes from a connection to heart, that we need in order to manage the tools that we have. So I'm seeing a big shift, and I think some of the things that are contributing to it have to do with our interconnectedness, as we said before, on a literal level. Again, somewhat due to technology, but the fact that we are now we're globally connected in ways that we weren't before. And, for example, my work day, today is an example, I have been on like 4 or 5 Skype calls today, several of which were international, and it's just the way I work. There are people on my team from all over the world. And, at the same time, the kind of local things are extremely important as well. And then also, I think the focus on neuroscience that is really emerging now is helping to make a link between our internal states and our intention and our ability to impact the world through our thinking and through our emotional understanding or lack of it is really an interesting area, and it's making the whole mindfulness movement come alive in ways that didn't exist before. And at the same time, how we conceive of ourselves as human beings is essential here.
Yes.
Who do we think we are? Do we think that we are imperfect beings that need enhancement, preferably technological enhancements to really be better, the kind of Superman mentality? And a lot of people are working on that project, how to create the perfect human being through technology or through, biotechnology. And then there's a whole group of people that are working on, wow, what if we could actually access who we are fundamentally? Yeah. And this comes from a very different belief system, one which, from a Buddhist perspective or a Shambhala perspective, we might call basic goodness, that we have all that we need. What we are missing is the connection to that. So Francisco Varela, who was a student of Chogyam Trungpa and also one of the founders of the whole field of cognitive psychology, talked quite a bit about the missing link of getting back to kind of who we are as human beings. And he called it the blind spot. And when one of the people I study with, Otto Scharmer, who's also a kind of a colleague of Peter Senge, did an interview with him, he expanded that notion to including leaders and said that leaders have a blind spot. And what it is that we focus so much on results that we often miss all that goes into it. So you could think about this as the artist and the painting. We focus on the painting. Do we like it? Do we not like it? And we analyze the painting. We might kind of think about playing with different colors. But the whole process of how the painting came into being determines what's even possible for that painting. So moving back from results to process. And then what Francisco was saying is that the whole new frontier, as far as ethical and kind of leadership based on wholeness, is the consciousness of the leader himself or herself. So who is it that's the painter, that's the artist in this situation? The interior condition of that person is what we need to work with. So he called the blind spot is actually our actual experience, which we're missing out on most of the time. Right. I'm just remembering back to some of the comments of the Dalai Lama at this program last weekend, where he was being interviewed by Richie Davidson and also by Amisha Jha, who was at Naropa just a few months ago. She's another neuroscientist who's been working closely with the Dalai Lama through all of these different studies. And I think, one of the main things he was saying is that we can talk about leadership and how we should be and all of that, but the time you really know who a leader is in a time of challenge.
Yes.
And, who do we become? Who are we in those times of challenge? And if we don't have any training, and this is also the promise of neuroplasticity, is that we can train ourselves, we can train our brains, we can actually overcome some of our reactivity. But if we don't train, then we do react. And when we react, we polarize. We go into our fight, flight, reacting place. And we will create a world that nobody wants. So I think what we're seeing as kind of the harbinger or the kind of portal into something new is this whole question of how can we train ourselves as leaders in new and different ways that bring out our humanity and that strengthen our core capacities that are unique to who we are as human beings and that allow us then to respond rather than reacting to situations. I just recently did a study on authentic leaders, and what I wanted to get at was the experience of authenticity in the workplace. And it's hard to really get that. Like, how do you do it? You take a picture of it or a video? Like, how do you know it's going to happen? And all of that. So you kind of have to do it a little bit in retrospect. But other people who teach authentic leadership pointed me to people to interview. And so I did. And after distilling down what an authentic leadership moment is, the first thing that everybody said was, well, somehow I start those moments by just hanging out in that ambiguity and not reacting. And that's like job number one for an authentic leader. Can you do that? So I think you're pointing to that, and there's so many things that inhibit us and so many things that get fired in our brain that keep us from doing that. So can we train that? Leadership is happening on so many different levels, and I think the first level that we're talking about is kind of self-leadership. So how do I, as an individual, work with my triggers and how I react and how I deal with these things? And whatever my background is, we all come with our issues. And so how do we work with that moment to moment is one question that I think is really even more poignant, in the sense that leadership is very personal. It's not just political, it's not just societal, it's how I respond in this moment. But also it's systemic, and so this issue of diversity is happening for us personally as well as in society. And so I at this point we wanted to shift and talk about kind of how each of us are dealing with training leaders in these new paradigms. And of course, we're just representing two small experiments, and there are many, many others that are going on in the world. Well, Yeah, I just wanted to kind of share the model that I work with, which is the integration of head, heart, and hands. And that, you know, I think in our society we're so focused on the head. We're really interested in ideas, in concepts, in theories, in, you know, in kind of the new thing, and how we're going to be saved by something outside of us that's going to make it all work. Okay, because there's always some new technological device coming along that's going to make it all be better.
Oh, the robots.
Well, the robots, right? Okay. And, you know, dropping down to actually feeling and sensing from the heart. What is that about? For a lot of us, that's a whole new language that we haven't really even explored. And finding ways to talk from the heart, speak from the heart, and say things that we might not feel are culturally appropriate. And so that requires creating a safe space in which that's possible to do. And then the next is taking action. So again, dropping down. How do you take authentic action from that place of joining the head and the heart in ways that are inclusive and engaging and shifting things for the whole? So it's those kinds of models that seem to really be helpful and useful in this environment. And then that's in the training, but the thing I find most interesting is how we take the application of the training into our everyday life in the training itself. So in the Authentic Leadership Program, we have, it's a 16-week program with 2 5-day intensives, and then in the 10 weeks in between, people are doing projects where they're bringing all of it into their lives, they're getting coaching, so that the actions are not something we save for later, but we do something about it, and then we get feedback and learn from all of that. So it's to the degree that people are able to open up to these new levels of authenticity and depth within themselves, we're finding that their effectiveness as leaders really increases. And so now the big challenge is, how do we measure that? So we need to bring research and science into our programs, which we'll be doing this spring. We have old models of leadership that are based on, you know, command and control, directing other people's work, evaluating it, and so on. And those are helpful in a certain framework. What I'm seeing anyway is that new models of leadership are needed now that have much more to do with leaders actually creating a space of conversation that is, you know, a safe zone, and how the leader does that has a lot to do with his or her own ability to self-regulate and to invite people into that conversation, and then to bring questions rather than answers to the table. It's not that they don't have answers, but if they can frame the question in such a way that it creates a solution space, again, rather than a space of everybody can comply with my idea because I'm the leader and I'm getting paid the big bucks, that solution space becomes a place from which everyone can draw sustenance and inspiration and can mobilize together. So that leadership in today's environment has much more to do with leading the system and leading the hearts rather than simply leading the actions of people. So it's an emergent phenomenon in groups, can be. So if you've studied system dynamics, then you know that the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so emergent qualities come out of different dynamics. And so a lot of what we're doing, and especially in the authentic leadership work, is we know we can't create authenticity, but we can create the conditions in which authenticity can be an emergent property of a group. Same with leadership. I love what you're saying. I think that's really an exciting way to think about it.